Thanks, Jerry, for having me. Hopefully, everybody had a great day and start to their week. I am Tiffany Ward. The name of my business is Utmost Capital LLC. I am based in Richmond, Virginia, where I was born and raised. I've been here pretty much all of my life. I do invest in my backyard and out of my backyard. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about my investing journey, just why I do mostly out-of-state investing for my multifamily properties, but I'm still bullish on my market. So as you can see here from the screen, I have a sweet little son. His name is Ricky. He's 4 years old. He's keeping me busy. Had to get him to bed a little bit early so I could be on here tonight. I am still full-time W-2 employee, so I am in sales, kind of like IT sales, data center sales. So if you heard of the cloud or storage or virtualization or anything data centric is what I focus on for sales. That does take me across the US in different markets. I also CrossFit, so the picture there in the middle is me lifting a little bit of weight. I can lift much heavier than that these days, but I like to try to get my body moving, stay in shape. I'm also a big foodie, so that's why I got to work out so I can stay trim and lean and just make sure I have a healthy lifestyle. But I'm a big foodie. I love coffee. If ever I'm in your city, I would like for you to take me to the local spots. That's my request. So outside of that, I do invest in single family here in Virginia. So I have a mix of single families and duplexes. They actually cash flow me very well. And so I enjoy those. I'm looking to acquire more of those. And then my multifamily holdings are currently in North Carolina and Alabama. So right now I have a couple 30 units. I haven't scaled beyond that. I am currently working on a deal right now, a 64 unit. Can't share a lot of details because it is a 506B. So I don't want to get any hot water on that, but I am working on a 64 unit currently that we hope to close in April. So that's exciting. I also act as a private money lender sometimes. So I lend in my self-directed accounts. I also lend out cash, but these days I'm trying to stay a little bit more liquid. Um, so I do offer short-term loans to fix and flippers or people who need to borrow, single-family investors. And then I am an ex-Airbnb host. So I did turn one of my duplexes into an Airbnb. I did that for about 2.5 years. And just based on the demands of my job and traveling so much, and probably a little bit of not having the right systems in place and people in place. For me, it was a little bit too much. And I realized I could still cash flow like $1,000 a month and never visit the property again. So I shut that down and I went back to long-term rentals, which is where I'll be for a while as the market changes and as I figure out, what my next steps are going to be. So I guess a little bit more about me. I started investing. I bought my first home at the age of 23, which is the home I'm in now. It was a foreclosure. It was a HUD home. Um, I didn't have to fix much on it. I think I had to like change out the locks, add some carpet, like in the upstairs room, and like paint. So it was a really good purchase for me. My property has appreciated well. And it was my first chance to house hack, which I didn't know what house hacking was. But at the time, I moved my best friend in. She was trying to get out of her parents' home. I was trying to get out of mine. It was a natural fit. And so I jumped into that. I got 3 jobs to make sure that I could pay the bills. I was super nervous about not being able to pay the bills and like not being able to pay the mortgage. So I just went crazy and I worked so much. Um, but it was all fine. It all worked out to the good. I ended up getting a different job, which took me to Northern Virginia for a couple years. And that's when I feel like I became a true landlord. And that opportunity um, gave me a lot of lessons, as does every phase of life. So, maintenance, increase in the rents, property management. I didn't have a lot of that stuff in place because I didn't know what I was doing. So years went by. I was still renting out the house. I was never raising the rent. I was fixing things out of my pocket. So, everything that breaks on the single family side, it pretty much depletes your income for the year. So I know that's why a lot of people like multifamily because of the economies of scale. And so through some trial and error in the single family space, I eventually found myself in the multifamily space. And I got there through a mentor. So I listened to a lot of Bigger Pockets. They were talking about like, okay, first you buy a single family, then you buy a duplex, then you get a quad, then you kind of doubling up every year. So that was my goal. I also knew that you could buy 10 properties in your personal name. So when I met with my mentor, I said, hey, my goal was to get 10 properties. And he was like, well, I got this 10 unit in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I need to dream a little bit bigger. So that was my introduction into multifamily in 2019. So it was a 10 unit in Greensboro, North Carolina. Um, and, my mentor at the time partnered with me. I was the KP on that deal, the key principal. I was able to go down, walk the property, meet the current owners, do the inspection with the inspectors there. So I felt really confident for that investment. And that was my first out-of-state investment. But it was close enough such that I felt comfortable to do it. I was comfortable with the team, and it was a joint venture, but the people that I was partnering with, I was comfortable with the numbers. I was still learning the numbers, but they made sense to me. And so that was my first venture into out-of-state investing. And so then from there, I met several other people like Jerry and others through multifamily meetups, through masterminds, and like, hey, I need to dig in and learn all about this multifamily thing if I'm going to be investing in it. So from there, I was able to meet the next group of people that I invested with, which was a 30 unit in Charlotte. That property, though, oddly enough, I've never been to. A lot of people for that first deal, I felt like I needed to go down, walk it, touch it, walk into the rooms. The other properties that I'm invested in currently, I've never visited them. So you have to have a lot of confidence in your team, and in their expertise and just in the numbers itself. And obviously using Google Maps and other things to make sure the property exists and that it's there. But so at this point, I mostly invest in multifamily properties out of state. So that's what I'm talking about a little bit today. Um, so this might be a refresher for John and Jerry, but maybe Alton and the rest of the team, whoever watches this, might get something out of this. But really, when you're looking at whether to invest in state or out of state, there are a number of factors. I'm going to try to summarize these here. But ideally, when you're trying to identify your target market, you're going to look in your backyard first. So here in Virginia, oddly enough, it's a really good market. We have consistent growth. We have consistent job growth, population growth. The median income is good. The cost of living is good, pretty good. And we are consistently improving. But for some people, such as Californians or people in New York, or some of these high these these states that are not necessarily landlord friendly, the policies are not friendly. These people want to invest in other markets, right? So another thing is like you ideally want to invest somewhere that you know well. So for some people, that's where you live. For some people, that might be a state that you visit frequently, or you lived there previously growing up, or maybe you went to school there. You want to invest typically somewhere that you know well. Or you want to have boots on the ground. So if you don't live there, as you evaluate in state or out of state or which state, whichever state that is, when I say boots on the ground, that's really your partnerships that you create. So that could be partnerships through school, through work, through the military, like whatever that is. You want to make sure that you have solid partners that can visit that property whenever something comes up. And so one of the major things that I've found for me and the markets that I select, I have been partnering or at least interacting, networking with people for many years before I partner. So a lot of people, which we can talk about in a different setting, is like, how do you vet your partners? But for me, it takes years of interactions and engagements for me to feel comfortable. But I also want to know that somebody is there within an hour of that property, such that if there is an issue, that they can get there, in a reasonable time frame. And I know a lot of people don't stick to that. Some people will say within an 8-hour drive. Some people will say within a flight, like, can you hop on a flight and get there the same day? I like to be able to either get there myself through some of those mechanisms, but ideally I do want somebody there in that state. So the deal that I'm currently working on that I won't say too much about, but there's somebody who lives there physically. So it's out of state for me. but someone is living there physically that can go and touch and see about their property. So that is a factor that you have to think about. And then maybe a place that you would move or visit, which we already touched on. So I'm going to go. So just some key considerations that I think of, which I've started to touch on a few. You want to make sure that there's some sort of market stability. So you want to look at population growth. You want to look at job diversity and growth and economic health of the market that you're looking at. So when we talk about population growth, I think ideally you want to see at least 1%, 1 to 2% increase every year. You want to make sure that no job takes up more than 25 to 30% of the market. So if you think of Detroit and what happened years back, when the car manufacturing plant shut down and when a lot of that stuff was moved out of Detroit, that city became very depressed, economically depressed. So that's what you want to stay away from. You want to make sure that there's great job diversity and great growth there. You also want to look at the rental demand. So you want to look at vacancy rates. Typically, I want to say 4 to 7% is normal. So when you start to look at different markets and you talk to brokers and they're sending you all these documents, it is typical to see 4 to 7%. If you're seeing greater than that across a larger, maybe sample size, then that might say, oh, this is cause for concern. Something's going on bigger, and I need to dig deeper into why there's so much vacancy here. You also need to look at rent growth. So I know we say 3 to 5%. 5% is aggressive. I feel like most markets recently have been seeing 2 to 3%, unless you're in an aggressive growth market. But at least 3 to 5% is typical for what we want to see as far as rent growth and then affordability. So we want to make sure that the median household income is 50K or greater. And then you want to make sure that the rent is not more than 25 to 30% of that income, right? So you want to make sure that they're not spending everything to live in your unit. So those are some things around the rental demand, landlord laws. As we know that there are landlord-friendly states, there are tenant-friendly states. So there are some states like California and DC, Washington, DC, where it's very hard to evict tenants who are not paying you. They can like take over your property. They can live for free and it takes forever to get them out, right? We ideally want to stay away from those states. And not get into politics, but typically Republican states are more landlord friendly if you're looking for different markets. So those are some key things to consider. You want to make sure that you can get, we want to do right by our tenants, but we also want to make sure that if they are not paying, if they're destructive, if there's anything there where they're not the ideal tenant, that you can't evict them. These days we have to look at flood zones. It's not on there, and like taxes. Insurance has been going crazy through the roof. Taxes have been going crazy. So you want to make sure that you talk to your brokers, talk to your attorneys, talk to your insurance guys and girls, and just make sure you have a good understanding of what is typical in that market. Flood zones, which I typically stay away from, tornado, hurricane zones, right? Like all those dangerous fires in like California again. California is like on the naughty list, I guess. But you just want to be mindful of all those things before you invest or choose your market. Property management is key. So property management and property managers are a key piece of your team. So you want to make sure that you have quality property management in that market. I personally like local property managers. Some people do invest and they partner with these large property management groups that have property management across multiple states. I want to know who the local guys are that live there. Like that's their niche, that's their market. They're not operating in multiple states. That's my preference. But there's some pros and cons, right, to local versus larger and the fees that they charge and the services that they're able to give you. So I would just make sure that you truly vet your property managers. I have walked properties with my property manager to make sure, like, hey, is this typical? Is the fixtures here, the carpet, the flooring, the lights, the rent, what is typical for this market? And that's going to be key if you're investing out of state. You want to make sure that they walk those properties with you and that they're familiar and that they have experience with a property of that size and in that class. So you don't want an A-class property manager trying to manage a C property or vice versa, right? You want to make sure that they're experienced and can help you effectively manage that property. You also want to seek out areas with major infrastructure projects. So I know this is like the Carolina connections. I just saw something on LinkedIn. It was saying that Charlotte was awarded like, I don't know, $400 million or something crazy for infrastructure projects. You want to make sure you're scouring the news, that you are aware of what's going on and like any businesses that are coming, any grants that the federal government is handing out, any major projects that's coming to an area. That is going to help with demand, job growth, obviously, demand for rentals as people come in and flock to that area. You just want to make sure you understand if there's any major infrastructure things, highways, are they putting a new highway through most of your state or this town? That signifies job growth and overall growth for rentals. And then I would just say avoid markets with oversaturation of rentals. So we do like to see at least 50% or more of renters to owners. I want to say I've heard that the problem area might be 75 to 80%. So why do I say that? You want you want there to be some homeowners because you want there to be demand for the rentals, right? So you want to look at new projects coming online, how well they get absorbed, but you also want to make sure there's not too much new construction that is going to take away from your property. You also want to make sure that there's not too many rentals because then there's so much demand that you can't increase rents, right? It's kind of like a supply and demand thing. So you want to try to find that sweet spot of at least 50 to 60, 50 to 70% of a rentals market. Um, Go next. So I started to list a lot of these things already. These are just some key things of what you should look for. So as far as the demographics, and I guess it depends on what your specialty is as well. So I focus on multifamily, but there are some people who focus on assisted living or nursing homes or trailer parks or whatever it might be. So you want to make sure that where you're investing matches those demographics as far as age, as far as income. Any of those things. You also, I think I already talked about the employment type. So you do want to look at the top 3 to 5 employers. You want to look at their reports, how well they're doing. And then you also want to look at education levels. We typically know it's tough to say. The more educated people are, the more savvy they are as far as paying their bills on time, the more income they typically make. So you want ideally some college educated or greater people to be there. You don't want an impoverished community because then you're getting to C class, D class properties that we typically don't buy, extra risky. So again, growth trends, we're looking for population growth at least 1% annually, job growth 2% year over year. And then employment levels. So I try to look at, there's some major employers, like if you look at Starbucks, you look at Walmart and Target, you kind of see where where these companies are popping up. They do signify job growth and economic growth. So like if you follow Starbucks, they put so much money into their data analysis and analytics around different populations and who's moving where. That's a good company to find and look at. You can also look at migration patterns. So I think the moving companies, they show data of how many people have moved from one place to another. So what are the trends? Are people moving out of this market or are people moving to this market? Obviously, again, we want to make sure that the population is growing because then the demand for rentals are growing. I like this list. So I don't know if you can screenshot this list or I can send it out. I've been compiling a list of sources from market analysis. So of course, you can go direct to the source, which is the Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Those are the big boys as far as just data around population trends, demographics, employment, wage data, etc. A lot of these other sites, they pull from that source, but they put it in nice, pretty diagrams that just make it easier to consume. So the ones that I really like, CoStar, if you can find your local CoStar employee or analyst, they pull great reports. It's free to you. CoStar is very expensive. I paid for it last year, did not get as much value out of it as I thought I would as a private investor, right? But they will pull nice, pretty reports. They will talk to you about the trend of data. I have found CoStar and those resources to be very helpful. Rentometer or Rentometer is just rent market analytics. So I would say you could go to apartments.com, which is free, Zillow Rentals, which is free. I like to look at a mix of that data and just kind of take an average. Um, I would say definitely look at your state, state, local, city government websites. A lot of them have a 5-year, 10-year plan. So you can see what they have already invested dollars to and the roadmap for the success of the city and make sure it's on track with what you want to do. There are some other ones, Area Vibes, Crime, which is Spot Crime if you want to see that. I also like datacommons.org. That was one I found recently. So it's all just these different ways to massage the data and get the statistics out of it that you want to see. I would definitely say talk to your brokers. They pull data. They also have access to these CoStar reports or Reonomy or any of these big reporting agencies. And then I would say talk to your local council, your congresswoman, your alderman. Make sure you're tuned in to what's happening with them because, again, they have insight into what's going on, the bigger picture of the cities that you're invested in. And I don't know, I rolled through that very quickly. I'm happy to take questions. So I don't know how beneficial that was. But this is me. If you want to call me, there's my number, there's my website. But yeah, any questions? And I'll
Thank
stop.
you. That was great. I was gonna actually, John had to jump, but I was gonna actually ask
Yes.
him, um, because you mentioned something about the property manager, and his story is that property manager is actually the mayor of Greenville, North Carolina. So that's actually pretty awesome. Um, yeah, what's kind of interesting, you mentioned the Starbucks, like in my personal, how I got attracted to like Greenville, South Carolina
Mhm.
kind of trying to understand, I saw a Whole Foods and there was a Top Golf and a few of these things that you wouldn't expect in an area of that smaller population. And then I kind of learned that it was a much larger, it was, a smaller piece of a much larger area, and there was a lot going on. So I think that's great to follow certain companies like you said, Starbucks and Whole Foods and places like that don't go just, Trader Joe's that just don't go into, they do the research for you. So that's awesome.
100%, 100%.
So open it up. We didn't, Chris and Jean, thanks for coming on here. We typically at the beginning, do a little introduction. Why don't we do that? If you, Jean, want to just give a few words about yourself, and then we'll continue with the Q&A.
Sure, no problem. My name's Gene Davis. I'm an investor in the Richmond, Virginia area. I buy and sell a lot of properties on owner finance. That's my main business model. I am looking to other markets at this point because mine is getting a little saturated. So that's kind of the reason for me joining the call. I've been investing since 2018. Um, Got started wholesaling, fix and flip. Now I kind of expanded onto where I am now.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you joining. And Chris, I saw you drop a note in there that you invest literally along where the city invests their money. And that's a great point that Tiffany made. I don't know if you're able to jump on the mic and give me a little bit about yourself.
Sure, sure, absolutely. One, thanks for having me. Super excited to be joining the team. For me, I've been actively investing for about 13 years. Predominantly, I've been in the single family space and some commercial, growing into the syndicated apartments sector. So, yeah, absolutely. In my experience, I'm currently based out of Charlotte. Let me see if I can get this video turned on. My apologies. There we go. I was out and about, but you guys get the real deal right now. So again, I appreciate it. But yeah, based out of Charlotte, I've invested across I say the Southeast between Mississippi, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina. Yeah, single families, fix and flips, ground up construction, fixing holes, Airbnbs, house hacking, you name it, I've done it. Um, Other than wholesaling, I hadn't had a lot of time to really just do that. But now leaning heavily into the syndicated deals with the commercial multifamily space. But yeah, so like in the city of Charlotte, the city had a redevelopment plan of where they were bringing the light rail in four quadrants, if you will, or like in a cross section. So literally, I took that redevelopment plan, read it, worked with my realtor, and I literally invested in those areas that were going through transformations. And I have a property that I bought the dirt for like 135, built a new house on it, all in mortgage at 377, and now what, that was 2018, a few years later, now at 985, right? And that's the Airbnb that's like my golden goose. So to the point, you're absolutely correct. I can vouch for that. um Definitely you want to put your money in where the city is putting their money, for sure.
Well, thank you, Chris. And yeah, I'll also give you, for the benefit, I know Tiffany knows that, but a little bit about myself and kind of what this is here. Funny, it's great because I look at this, look at the date 2/25, 2025. For me, it was we're like 5 years ago, almost 5 years from when the world changed for it was insane. So for me, I work in a W2, I work in finance. I work at a hedge fund that is owned by family. I don't like to say it's a family office because it's a billionaire family basically, but they buy. They're primarily equity trading. We're a long short hedge fund, but they started to get into real estate. But of course, they bought very big buildings. And for me, I'm working finance, and to me, it's a spreadsheet. I'm like, oh, okay, these guys buy a $50 million building. That's not something for me. But I started to research and look into real estate, and I found syndication. So I'm actually a little different than most, where I didn't start on the end of getting, like a fix and flip. I went straight into investing in multifamily syndications. And my first investment was actually literally 5 years ago around this time, to the point that I did a tour with the operator, and it was the first week of March. And I remember it was that weird stage where we like, did a pound. We didn't know what to do. Like, do we shake hands? It's like, there's stuff going on in the world. And boom, obviously a couple weeks, months, weeks later, and we were all behind our computer like this. And it was actually an opportunity for me to study out of state markets. And I was crashing the Asheville, I was Charlotte, all these places in North, South Carolina, their meetups that I went online, and I connected with a lot of great people. Tiffany, we met, I think actually it was probably like 3, 4 years ago around this time now. So same thing. And what I ended up getting the concept was like, all right, everybody's going to go back, into their person when everything opens up. So I created this kind of a meetup, and I call it the Connection. And it's a really nice mix of people that are down in the markets like this, as well as like New Jersey, New York area. So, appreciate you guys coming up. So that's enough of my little spiel. But so Tiffany, that was great. I guess one thing I would ask, it's an interesting question because I drove through Richmond and I saw so much growth going on there. So um, in order for you to leave such a hot market uh, and go elsewhere, is it just that there's a little bit, you don't feel that there's not enough growth in some of the outer areas of Richmond, or is it, you prefer to go somewhere else where, you can see that growth already happening?
So I think it's two things. And Gene's here with me, so he can give his opinion. But we've seen growth. I want to say our rent affordability is through the roof. So a lot of people have been coming here from Northern Virginia, California, New York, whatever, kind of coming in. And so we've seen that Richmond City is getting very expensive. The Richmond kind of local, smaller MSAs, getting very expensive. We are seeing growth in the outskirts. So our secondary and tertiary markets close to the Richmond MSA are starting to pop. So the challenge with that is there's a lot of D class properties that are slowly but surely appreciating and making themselves into C and then C to B. Some of those markets are still dangerous, right? Depending on where you go, there's pockets, street by street. So I would say it's growing, but those outer cities, the secondary and tertiary markets around the Richmond MSA are growing slowly and steadily. What I will say, as you start to do bigger deals, finding a sponsor, and we might be getting down in the weeds for Alta, but finding a sponsor to pay for some of these deals is really the issue. So I network quite a bit, and a lot of people are focused on, for a while, they were focused on the Carolinas. Like I feel like in 2020, 2021, the Carolinas were booming, Southeast was everything. So many people right now that I come across, they're focused on Texas. Everybody loves Texas. Everybody loves Tennessee. Everybody loves Florida. And then you'll find some smatterings of like the Midwest, right? St. Louis or Alabama, whatever that is. I have found that not a lot of people focus in Virginia. And even in like Maryland, I mean, I don't know what you see, Jerry, for like Jersey. It's a very niche group. So you have to find your sponsor that can do the size deals that are out there. So like right now, if I look at the Marcus and Miller chap, the One South, like the local brokerages, and I look at what they have listing, well, first of all, they got 200 units, 150 units. Okay, so I'm not there yet, right? You have to have someone with the net worth or the liquidity for that deal. So if you're talking a 25, 30, $40 million deal, well, you have to have a pretty strong network for that. And so I would say also that's the challenge where I do see smaller stuff like 2 to 4s, right? Okay, we can play there. There's not as much things that come on the market 5 to 30, 5 to 50 here in Richmond. If they do, we have found, I've talked to brokers about this, that a lot of um, not private money, not private investors, institutional investors, family offices, like the big boys from New York and DC, they're like, oh, this is a drop in the bucket, boop, and they just buy it up.
Yeah,
They
private
gobble it.
equity.
Yeah, private equity, that's what I was trying to say. Like they're just gobbling it up. And so the little guys like me, we're like, these numbers don't make sense, but to them, they have their different buy boxes and the numbers just kind of make sense. So that was a long drawn out uh response there. But to me, I think it's both of those factors.
Got it. Chris, I think you raised your hand, and I know that's interesting because Charlotte is probably a market like that too, where there's a lot of institutional players that came in there.
Mhm.
Yeah, very, very true. No, I was actually just giving her kudos because one, it seems, Tiffany, that you definitely know your markets and follow the trends. So I've lived like coast to coast. Yeah, Jersey, like I did my master's in at Drexel. Like for Jersey, those property taxes alone, that was a non-starter for me. But also in those markets where you see it, it's literally block to block. And that is so strange because I've never seen anything like that. Because typically you have like, oh, stay out of the west side or stay out of the south side.
Yeah.
But in those markets, it's literally block to block for sure. Um, in those tertiary markets that you were discussing, it's like, oh, that's a good deal because like I want to look at those as well. So to the point of this particular topic of out of state investing, yeah, I'm not new to it, but definitely looking for other opportunities as well.
Yeah, and I think it depends on your risk profile. I saw Gene come off mute. But I think it depends on your risk profile. So like for us, we have an area called Petersburg. Gene knows it. I think Jerry might have visited when he was coming through. Petersburg for years has been very rough, but now we're
Hmm.
finally getting to a price point, a price per door, and like rent rates that like property managers will start to pick up the business. And so we're
Right.
seeing so many flippers that have come in and helped to revitalize the area. They finally got a casino coming for good or bad or whatever. So we're starting to see like this trickle of businesses come through. And because Richmond proper is so expensive, so people have to
Mhm.
start living on the outskirts. It just took a long time to get there. So if you were, in it for the D class, F class property, and you wanted to buy and hold, it's a great market for that, for the long-term game, like you said.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was going to touch on too. So if you hit it right on the head as far as our market, one of the things I have noticed here is I talk to a lot of asset managers, and a lot of them are saying like they're noticing hedge funds are buying a bulk of their inventory. And I see that what's happening here in Richmond as well, because like she said, a lot of people are coming from the DC, Northern Virginia area, as well as up from Charlotte to this general area because it's cheaper. The problem is here is that because that big money is being dumped into this market, it's causing rent rates to go through the roof. And the people who are here are being pushed to those, I can never say the word, tertiary area. I can never say that word.
Tertiary, yeah.
Yeah,
Third
Third
level.
layer, third layer.
Yeah,
there you
yeah,
go.
yeah.
Yeah, they're getting pushed out there, and the thing is now is that when you go to those areas, like she said, it's a block by block thing. Like you could have, like I have a house in Petersburg. There's new construction two doors down from me. But if you go on the other side of the street, you got people hanging outside 4 or 5 in the morning. So it's like it's hard to sell those new construction properties when you got all this going on around you. So it's kind of like you have to look into these other areas that are not in the big metros. And one of the things that I did start to see here, especially here, talking to some of the people that do a lot of multifamily, they're saying that they're starting to move to those areas and put multifamily out there and get away from the Richmonds and the Charlottes. They're actually converting a lot of warehouses and abandoned schools and churches and stuff like that into multifamilies. So I don't know if that's the next wave of things versus new construction multifamily. I'm still on the fence trying to figure out which direction to go with that.
It's a great point. I think finding as it grows, like you bring up a good point about how like it gets street by street, right? Like, and that's why, like, from we're talking about out of state investing. So my focus, by the way, for is Greenville, South Carolina. And I literally did not know anything about it, 5 years ago, and I just kind of ended up down in that area. And then now I've been there several times, and I can see the growth, and I have good people that I partner with, so you can know different areas, but it always is difficult to know, like, oh, how do you know when the growth is going to stop and go like a little bit too far? And I think that's where when you're competing against these larger institutions, if you have some of that local knowledge of and look in smaller type of properties, it might be a little bit worthwhile. But then, of course, becomes, as Tiffany mentioned, a capital issue, right? So it's not an easy game. So Alton, if you have any questions, jump in. I mean, you have some interest that you go to school out in a good market, obviously in Raleigh area, which is one that's super hot. And I know you also know the Greenville, North Carolina area very well.
Yeah, I went to school in Greenville, so I do know that area really well. I don't really have any questions specifically. I do want to know if she could share, or if Tiffany could share that slide with all the data sources.
Yeah. If you put your email in the chat, I'll send it to you. And I like I was kind of just rolling through them. I do like some of the bigger publications. So your large brokers, your CBRE, I don't know if they consider brokers, they do sell properties, but your CBRE, your Marcus and Millichap, they have great market research and they'll put out their projections for the year. So they kind of look back and they look forward. So I would say pay attention to those. There's another one that's called IRR.com. I think I have it on that list. But I do like, the CoStar reports and then some of these bigger publications because they will often stack rank markets. So another one, I don't know if it's on my slide. I want to say it's Milken Institute.
Yep.
Right now, if you go
That's the other one.
Milken, yeah, they
Yeah.
will stack rank on a scale of 1 to 5. And it's also by size, I want to say. But they will say, like, what are the top growth markets? And it's color coded and everything, so it makes it really easy to read the charts. But you can see, like, this random town in Virginia. I want to say it was like Warrenton, Virginia, or something random, was like one of the top markets. Now, I would never think that Warrenton, Virginia is like a big market, but for whatever reason, that little area is bustling. So then it's like, as you're looking for somewhere to focus on, and for me, my radius that I want to stick to, it's like, okay, maybe I'll drive up there and see what's going on, and maybe I'll look at properties and see how many multis are there, or if like build to rent is your thing, see if you can build something there, or these conversions that Gene's talking about, right? Like, um, these larger shops give very good data, but then it's also good to talk to your local brokers who will have the boots on the ground knowledge, right? Because they're living it day to day, and they can tell you that street by street information that you'd be looking for. I got it out
So,
to things.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think, Gene, did you raise your hand, or that was a high five?
oh no, she actually answered my question because I was gonna ask you the same because Tiff, I don't really have that level of expertise as far as those sources. And I was
Mhm.
gonna ask, like, what I was doing was like I pick a county and you tell me if I'm going in the right direction with this or not. I pick a random county and I map Chick-fil-A's or
Mhm.
Starbucks and anything that's within 2 to 3 miles of that. I was kind of focusing on those little pockets. Is that a bad way of going about it, or do you feel like that's just a long way of going about it?
It's not a bad way. It is a long way, but I
Okay.
mean, it's a way.
I,
It
I'm
is.
I'm a
I mean,
big
I wouldn't say like Chick-fil-A is good, and then for me, like I do like Starbucks because they're not everywhere. I think once you get to Whole Foods, Jerry, like you done made it
Yeah, I'm
now.
priced out. Yeah, I'm priced out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we done missed the boat, but you
that's a
can. But I think some of these other tools will just be good, and I'll send it to you, Gene. Um, will be good to look at as well, which might speed up your path.
I'm a big map person, so I like Google Maps. I haven't done this in a long time. If you ever get a list of apartments, you could load it up there and map it out. And it doesn't really matter like if it's a list that's current, like in terms of owners, you just, because obviously the apartment building is still going to be there, so just get the address. I did that with Winston-Salem, and it was actually a really kind of fun exercise. And then mapping things. I think I was looking for like breweries and things like that, where, and it worked, it helped a lot. So like Google Maps is a good source.
Yeah, Google really is a great data source. So some of these things, and I try to put dollar signs by some of them, but I think I ran out of time. Some of these things obviously cost, some of these tools. So I would try to use the free tools as much as possible. And then I mean, I'm in Virginia, and I know this is Carolina or connections. So I want to say I have the CoStar guy for or girl for North Carolina as well if y'all need that resource, and they might be able to give you some of those CoStar reports. But yeah, I'll send it out.
Yeah, I think if you do the research, a lot of times you do it once and you're in the general areas. So if the brokers will have it, or you can find somebody that might be able to download a report for you, or do that. So I think that's a good.
Yeah. But I
Well,
would say you also want to be able to visit, right? So I would think any new market, and I kind of said, hey, I hadn't visited, but some of those investments are passive that I'm in. So I was like, okay, I'm passive. I feel comfortable with the GP team. But the Charlotte area, I've been to Charlotte plenty of times for different reasons. So I felt confident in the area that I didn't necessarily need to go drive street by street. But I would say if it's a totally different market, like one of the deals I'm doing right now, I hadn't been to this area much. And the typical thought of it was not a great market. So I wanted to go drive the area. It's close enough for me to drive up there and see it. Especially if I'm going to be asking people for their funds. I want to be familiar and confident in that investment. So again, you either want to get there yourself or have boots on the ground that you feel confident in.
Absolutely. Did you visit it at night or on the weekend?
I didn't, but I have some friends who live locally and they told me.
Right. Good
See,
deal.
Chris, it's a good point because I had a deal fall through. Now, all of my investments are actually passive investments. But I did have I will, if the opportunity comes up, do a joint venture, and we were close. I had two fall through. Sorry, three, two in Greensboro and one in Concord.
Oh,
Out,
okay.
yeah. And then that was right before the rates went up, and then it's just been too difficult from there. But because it was like I was willing to get in with a small group. The Concord
Hmm.
one was a great experience because we actually had went into we were under contract, so we did the walkthrough, and
Right.
to your point, it's like it's such what are people doing? Are people hanging out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or like what kind of cars are there? Like it's a good point to see it at different times of the day, at different times. Also, like when people are moving in and out on the weekend, so that's a great point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And those are those little, nuances that most people either are unaware of or haven't experienced, to understand. Like everything looks great when you have the drone giving you the aerial shots. It's a beautiful day, right? Like when you see things in the best light, but the best light may not be the realistic scenario that property is actually existing in.
Mm.
Well, we're heading up to the 9 o'clock point, so I like to keep it to the hour. And Tiffany, I appreciate your time, and we all got to get our rest and sleep. So that was really good. Good conversation. Chris, Jean, thanks for joining. It was great to meet you. I'll definitely send you a follow-up note. And do this. I kind of keep the cadence to once a month. Sometimes, I'll do one in person around us, but I'll definitely be back in touch. That's my 9 o'clock
See you next time. Thanks, Jerry.
reminder.
Definitely. Thanks
And
all. I
Alton,
appreciate
thanks
it.
again for coming on, and
Cheers.
we'll see you next
Thanks,
time.
guys.